Just welcome and hello everyone. And local group Darmstadt present today. The topic is about the reflections about the project management and the long distance running with Lutz Kalcker. Okay, this is the agenda for today's webinar. We are going to talk about briefly the PMI Germany chapter itself, the local group with Darmstadt, and the basic rules that we have. And I'm going to introduce today's speaker, which is Lutz. And Lutz start his presentation, which is about the reflection about the project management and the long distance running. And after that presentation finished by Lutz, I'm going to talk about the information about our next events and about the PDU code and the rate the event. Okay, as a basic rules, as a humble request, I just request you to please mute your microphone, but feel free to share your video and use the chat box or chat window to ask questions and comments. And you can also share your LinkedIn link through the chat window as well. Please use your full name in the webinar so we can identify you for a video codes. And you're invited to contact our speaker in case of any questions. And this session will be recorded and the presentation will be shared after the webinar. Okay, Project Management Institute Germany chapter. There are more than 20 plus local groups in 5 regions in Germany, which is a very international community. We have more than 3,300 members in all over the Germany. We organize the events, projects, and working groups on the regional and local level as well. Local Group Darmstadt. Local Group Darmstadt is the only local group which is the business language is English speaking. We are 5 volunteers from 5 countries. Elena is from North Macedonia. Florian is from France. Thomas is from Germany. Tufik is from Lebanon, and myself is from Afghanistan. We normally arrange or organize 2 free online events, webinars per month. We have more than 2,000 participants from this inception. More than 25 people are attended more than 10 times in our webinars. And we organize 1 free face-to-face webinars in Hochschule Darmstadt, normally one per month. And we have a LinkedIn group, which is with more than 290 members. Please join us in our LinkedIn group as well. So I'm introducing our speaker, which is Lutz Kalcker. He's a PMP MBA, and he has 25 years experience in international project management, professionally focused on global consulting and software projects in automotive retail. He trained, coached project managers and 8 teams in troubled projects. He's a long distance runner, 100-kilometer or 100-mile finisher, and he is a former team handball player as well. Yes, he is from Germany. Okay, Lutz, now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mohammed, for the kind introduction. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. Just a quick check. You can see the screen?
Right, we can see.
Excellent. Good. Welcome to my presentation today about reflections on project management and long distance running. I added 1 line to the topic, why responsibility matters, and we'll come to that in a minute. Long distance running, right? You have time to think. I'm a project manager basically all my professional life, so the two connected at one moment in time, particular preparing for the long runs. A few words about myself. I'm married, I have 2 daughters, and I live just south of Frankfurt, Germany in Mörfelden-Walldorf. And I have two passions. One is project management. The second is endurance sports. I'm a certified project manager, PMP. I'm the regional PMO manager at Urban Science, my company where I'm employed. I'm also a certified business mediator and change manager. A couple of years ago, I also got certified as a trainer when we did a lot of training courses for our clients. I'm passionate about endurance sports. I'm a 5-time Ironman finisher. I finished the 100K Taubertal run, the Berlin Mauerweglauf last year, and a couple of other marathons and multiple half Ironmans. It's a bit about my setting, and I would like to share some personal learnings from running as well as managing business projects. The company I work for is mainly working for automotive companies in aiding and supporting their automotive retail networks. We have our own software and consultants to increase performance of automotive retail networks. If you want to learn more about Urban Science, you can look at urbanscience.com and find all the necessary information, or contact me after the call. So what are our objectives today? And please jump in if you have any questions or any additions during the presentation. So before we get started, we want to talk about and remind ourselves about goals, the importance, and what they mean for us as an individual. And they can be, and they must be individual and tailored to your individual needs. We'll talk about a process, the responsibility process, which has helped me to obtain a different mental stage to take responsibility and ownership of my actions. And we'll see how that framework will help us to avoid different stages, just as justifying or blaming when we talk about that process. And then we'll have a few comments on similarities and differences between endurance sports and business projects. And then ideally, and this is my first question to you in a second, I would like you to encourage you to restart or start your own project. So my first question to you is, and you can add that to the chat if you like, or you don't have to, you can keep that for yourself. Which project did you always wanted to start but did not start yet? That can be anything. Learning the piano, painting, in business, in private. Just think about that for a second. And a real estate project I see in the chat. Okay, that's very ambitious. Yeah. Good. Thomas wants to fly to the moon. Okay. Piano lessons, playing the guitar, moving to self-employment. So a wide range of projects that you personally would like to start. And or maybe you have started and stopped, it dropped off your priority list. So a couple of projects that that have been mentioned in the chat. Great. Okay, so we'll come to those at the end of the presentation. And here's really the three elements I would like to cover during my presentation. As I said, let's start with the goals. That's really the foundation. Then move on to responsibility, which leads into action. And then we'll have a conclusion. Let's look at goals. And my goal last year was to run 100 miles around West Berlin along the former Berlin Wall. And that was my goal. It was measurable. It was ambitious for me, at least. And I had a clear date when I wanted to accomplish my goal. So, you know, you might had your other goal. I heard we had a couple of runners there. So maybe your goal has been to run a certain distance at a certain speed. My goal here was to finish. That's it, finish in the given time. Thinking about why goals are useful and setting goals, just a reflection on that. Direction and purpose, right? You are gaining some clear direction and something to strive for, take action, and to move forward for. It also helps to provide focus and prioritization, right? Because there are so many moving parts in our lives, in business and private. But having a specific goal will probably help you to prioritize your efforts, right? So if it's clearly your ambition, your goal, then you will set the priorities, you'll allocate time, energy to it to achieve that goal. Also, if goals are written and formulated in a meaningful way, they are measurable, right? So you can really see if you have achieved your goal or not, whatever that goal might be. It is also helpful for personal growth, right? I've seen the entrepreneur hub or the developing your own or creating your own business, right? Personal growth, a key, a key component of setting a goal and boosting confidence, right? If you achieve your goal, that you can learn a lot, you're gaining confidence, you can take on new challenges. And creating meaning, right? Goals give our actions meanings. They connect us to a larger purpose, whether that is improving our health, as we have talked about in the beginning of the conversation, or ruin your health if you run too much, right? But there's a larger purpose, right? And you know, I think this creating of meaning is really key, and that is very personal, right? It can be, you know, a very individual goal that you are setting. Just a reflection, reminder of why goals and goal setting is useful, and I'm pretty sure every one of us has had some experiences with that, at least at work, right? But it's also very useful to have private goals. And one quote that has followed me for a long time is from Stephen R. Covey, author of the 7 Habits of Successful People. It's if the ladder is not leaning against the wall, the right wall, every step we take just gets us to the wrong place faster. And when you pause for a second, right, in this fast-paced times, sometimes I wonder, are we just stepping up the ladder faster? Or are we also pausing for a moment? Are we going in the right direction? Are we pursuing the right goal? And that is, you know, at times when everything is hectic, I find that quite comforting if you take your time and reflect about your goals. Is that the right wall you're leaning your ladder against, right? And when it comes to goal setting, it's not only ensuring that the ladder is leaning on the right wall, which, you know, compare that to setting your goal. You also then need to work towards that goal, is climbing the ladder. And in that context, I would encourage you to never underestimate the importance of small steps, right? Sometimes goals are really set, you know, on large terms, and that's why many people fail with their goals. It's too ambitious. You know, you need to start thinking in small steps and small increments when you try to achieve your goals. And we'll come to that thought process in a few slides. And then there are obviously people that have problems with goal settings or avoiding those. And a few bullet points came to my mind. that some people, some individuals might prefer to live in a comfort zone, right? That someday I'll move on and someday I'll start practicing and someday I'll start my training, and then tomorrow becomes the next week, the next month, the next year. So one thing leads to another. And then a point which I've noticed these days with quite a few people is a negative mindset. And I'm wondering if that is from the news media, the negativity that's out there that, occupies people's minds, right? Not only that, but maybe you also have had a negative experience that can contribute to that. And I try to think of negative mindset as a weed, right? It's spreading and growing. Even if you have, just a first start, it's really, really something to watch out for, that you don't get occupied with a negative mindset. And then, of course, if you have vague goals, then that's, very difficult to tackle and, probably also very, disappointing, right? But it's really times when your goal is not specific, that it's very hard to accomplish a unspecific goal. And then doubts and lack of belief. If you're doubting your own abilities, it's very difficult. But I've also been thinking along the lines, if you are in a business setting, right, if you are not believing in the software capabilities, in the features, in the purpose of your company, that's really, really difficult, right? It's really, really difficult if you are lacking the belief that, yes, this software, this service, this approach will make a difference. Procrastination in action. Personally, I had that during my studies at times. I was pushing writing the paper to the next day, to the next week, right? And sometimes that is still, or one can trap himself into that same behavior. And I think probably the two most common ones are, if you're mindlessly surfing the web or if you're just watching TV. And let's be honest, we are all humans, and it's easy to get, to surf the web for hours, and there's your training hours, right? People ask me, well, it's very time consuming, but if you for 1 or 2 weeks take note of what are you doing, surfing the web, watching the TV, whatever, it's amazing how much time you have. And another consideration is many of us have a privilege of working at home, so the commuting time is saved. Another benefit you can add, let's say, towards your goal that you want to achieve, right, to your project that you want to restart or start. And then unmotivating goals, right? I mean, how dull can goals be if you don't drive for them, if you're not motivated, it's going to be very difficult to keep the momentum over a long time. And then maybe that's a German thing. I don't want to over exaggerate stereotypes, but the fear of failure. I've heard this multiple times when I've talked to fellow runners that, oh, well, I'd better not tell my friends I'm trying to run my first half marathon. And I've always wondered, why is that? Why are people, well, why is that? And I've looked at it in a bit different. If you haven't tried it, well, then you need to go to the start line in order to achieve, right? And many things can go wrong. But if you're not at the start line, you're never going to make it, right? So failure comes with projects. They are unique and things can go wrong. So I don't think failure is necessarily something bad, because you can learn from it, right? And we'll come to that at at a later point in the presentation. Laziness, yeah, sometimes it's the discipline to get up after work and go running or do the painting or learn the piano, right? It's sometimes very hard. So there's no doubt about that, that can contribute to avoidance of goals, right? And then something which I think is also important to mention is that some people seem to have a desire for instant gratification. They want to be awarded, they want to be gratified immediately. But if you are aiming at a long-term goal, it takes months or years at time, and nobody will pay attention to you running in the woods Sunday morning, learning the piano Sunday afternoon, right? Nobody will pay attention to. They will eventually, when you are, playing the piano or doing the run, but it's something to bear in mind that some goals you need to think in long terms and there's no instant gratification. And last point on this slide, really previous disappointments. And there many things can go wrong. But that really shouldn't stop you from setting yourselves new goals. And again, it leads back to the negative mindset. Don't let this disturb you from moving on, right? We are living in the future, not in the past. You can learn a lot from it. And those have been a couple of thoughts on myself, why people that I've worked with may have had some difficulties with goal setting. And then maybe the next question is, well, how can I set goals? How can I set meaningful goals? And there's really a lot of tools or ways to define your own goal. One, I guess, is really to start with a self-reflection, right? Take time to reflect on your interests, on your strengths and weaknesses, and what are your core values, like what matters most to you, right? Those are a few questions that will probably help you identify meaningful goals for your own benefit. SMART goals, SMART, specific, measurable, achievable. Achievable is key, right? They have to be somewhat realistic, right? And relevant, as I said earlier, relevant for you as a person, and time bound. They need to have a start end date or a certain date upon which you want to have your goal completed. Otherwise, it's really hard to arrive at a goal or accomplish a goal if they are not measurable. Another tool, the life wheel exercise. Basically, if you divide your life into different areas such as career, health, relationship, things like that nature. And if you then rate your satisfaction with each of the areas, it helps you to identify areas where you may want to improve or set a goal accordingly. Yeah. So the life wheel exercise. People that are more visually thinking, visually working, it might be that the vision board can help you. So if you collect images, quotes, symbols, right, it helps you to visualize your goals. So some people like to write, some people like to work with visuals. So maybe that's more, if that's more of your working mode, then you can probably think about the vision board. Mind mapping, probably as project managers, you're all aware of that. So there are different mind mapping tools, techniques out there to visualize and organize your thoughts and ideas. For example, clustering around a central theme such as career, health, and relationship. And then you can brainstorm and add to those categories and see how they are interconnected. Then the SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Probably we all have done that in business, but you can probably do that also for your own environment, for your own personality. And then how to address your weaknesses, leverage the opportunities, right? And mitigate threats to the relevant goals. Some companies have goal-setting worksheets. You know, we have different, you know, depending on what different tools you are using in your company. So those resources might also be helpful if you need some structure, right? Something to consider. Peer feedback. That's something if you want to seek input from your friends, families, members, maybe fellow workers, mentors, or trusted colleagues, right? And sometimes they can provide valuable insights and perspective that you may have not considered on your own. Yeah. Sometimes you get that through the goal setting process and then the 360 degree feedback. But again, you can also probably capitalize on that when you're setting your private goals. Yeah. And then something professional coaching or mentoring, something that, by the way, the PMI chapter Germany is also offering. You know, where you can find a coach or mentor that can guide you through the goal setting process and work with you on your accountability, maybe encourage you when it's getting a bit difficult, right? Challenge you. So a couple of thoughts and steps and ways on how you can set your own goal. So there's plentiful, right? And each of us ticks in a different way. So for one, you know, mind mapping words, a different person might prefer a vision board or peer feedback. It all depends on your personality. So talking about goals, I was wondering, well, what's the goal of a project? If you are assigned as a project manager, what would be the resource to tap into? And I would assume that most of you would think, okay, maybe it's the statement of work. If it's a client paid project, right, you would look into that and you would see, okay, what are the goal or the goals, objectives of the project? Or probably if it's a internal project, maybe you would look at the project charter to identify the goals. Any thoughts on that? How to identify goals of a project, a business project? Other sources of getting the goal? No? Okay. Let's move on after we covered the topic of goals. Let's move on to responsibility. So the reason why I think your own responsibility is key is that, you know, there's an external stimulus and then there's a response. And in between, you have a choice. And we just have to be aware of our choice, that I can decide what my choice has to be. And the trap we are falling in is very often that emotions take over and we respond immediately. Sometimes it makes sense to pause for a moment and to reflect. I have a choice. I have a choice how I will design my response. And I think this is important to jump into the responsibility process. And the responsibility process is a process of framework, I should say, that helps individuals understand how they respond to challenges, problems, and take ownership of their actions, right? The process was developed by Christopher Avery in the US, and it consists of several stages that individuals typically go through when faced with a problem or a mistake, right? And let's be honest, we all have probably faced the initial stage where we deny a problem exists, right? Or a challenge exists, be that privately or personal. It's just a matter of human nature, right? And denial is probably the first stage, and denying the responsibility for the situation or the problem. And then individuals often blame external factors or other people or circumstances of what has happened. And then, the problem doesn't go away. We move into the lay blame stage. And in this stage, individuals typically shift from denying responsibility to blaming others. Finger pointing is typically a good, typical behavior. External circumstances without acknowledging your own role in that. And then the next stage is justification. And at this stage, the individual starts justifying their actions or decisions. And they may provide reasons or excuses why they acted in a certain way or why the problem occurred. But it's really they are deflecting their accountability and responsibility in this context. And typically when you listen, you probably gonna hear sentence like it's the economy, it's the management, it's the culture. So if these phrases pop up, be alert, somebody's probably in that justification stage. Or you're finding out yourself are in the justification stage. The next stage is the shame stage, laying blame onto yourself, guilt. And this stage involves recognizing one's own role for the problem and feeling regret or remorse for it, right? And then you're probably gonna hear things like, I should have known better before, stuff like that. So be on the lookout for those phrases, and then you probably can allocate somebody into that stage. And then, some people then drop out, they quit, right? They just cannot stand the pain anymore, or they move on in the obligation, where really in this stage, individuals begin to acknowledge their responsibility and they feel obligated to address the problem or the situation, right? And it's their duty to take action and get active. But it's still you are still driven from an external factor. Yeah. And what Christopher Abel recommends is that we move to the responsibility stage. And that is the stage, the final stage where responsibility and ownership are fully embraced. And then if you accept full responsibility for your action without blaming others or making excuses, the focus will be on finding solutions, learning from mistakes, and taking proactive steps to prevent similar issues in the future. So when I thought about this, it's like, well, shouldn't project managers be in that stage, right? Because it doesn't help us to blame, it doesn't help us to justify, and it also doesn't help to shame. If you should have known upfront, right? Well, then we'll come to that. Maybe make use of a radar log, right? So a couple of connections between this process or framework that Avery defined, which I've personally found very helpful, particular in observing meetings, in observing individual behavior, and trying to place people in those different stages. It's really amazing. If you do that for a week or two, it's amazing what you'll find out. Yeah. So the responsibility process, it's not a linear progression, right? And you might find people that move back and forth between stages, but really the overall intent here is to cultivate a mindset of ownership, responsibility, and to take ownership of your actions. So now that we've talked about the responsibility process, right? We have knowledge about it, but then there's always this gap. Well, how do we move knowledge into responsibility, right? And there's really three key steps, and I alluded to that in the last minutes, how you take the knowledge of the responsibility process. And three main steps are the intention, that you are intending to move up to the responsibility stage, and then the attention, to listen to your surroundings, but also to listen to yourself, right? Very often, if you start blaming others, pay attention to what you're saying, pay attention to what stage you might be in. And if you've paid that attention, you can confront yourself or others to move up in the stage, right? And I find that very useful, because otherwise, if you're not confronting yourself with, the stage you are in, nothing will change, right? So it's really moving knowledge to responsibility. I think those are three good steps that can aid ourselves in moving up the stage and moving to responsibility. So my question to you would be, if you think about the responsibility process, what topics are currently on your mind professionally or privately, and would you be able to sort your thoughts, emotions along the responsibility process, right? Where, if you have a certain topic, where would you allocate yourself currently in that responsibility process? You can use the chat or open the mic, but I also do understand if you don't want to share topics here at this point, but just for your own reflection, maybe you can take this away and follow up, reflect about the responsibility process after the call. Good. Then, don't see anything in the meeting chat. I will continue with action. And right, we need to action things. Nothing happens on its own. And for me, there are a couple of things that help me during long distance run, but also during projects. So reflecting on your values and priorities is usually a starting point, like how far would you go? Not literally speaking in running, but also in terms of business behavior, business ethics. Identifying your own areas for improvement or growth, right? To make a deliberate decision to take on a project or not to take on a project. Again, be reminded to define specific and measurable goals. And then really a key here is then to break them down into smaller steps, right? Considering potential obstacles and challenges. Come to that in a second. And staying flexible and adapt as needed, right? If you're getting sick or if your business suddenly has a huge demand for you or no time, then be flexible, right? But again, don't take that as an excuse not to follow up and pursue your goals, right? Set deadlines or timelines is really key, right? Learning the piano, you need to have a timeline, reserve time for that. Personally, I like to visualize things, so visualizing success is key. Having a picture in mind, and for example, before I started running the 100 miles, I took that picture, 250 meters to the finish line. That was the picture I had in mind when I was at the starting line. I've also learned that if you set goals, or when I listen to people setting goals, they're often used, I will try to, I would like to, phrases that are very passive. It really changes the approach if you are actively describing this, such as, on May 1st, I will be at the starting line and I will finish the race. Or I will start learning the piano starting May 1st, and on August, I will be able to play the first set. Yeah. To me, that has really also meant a lot in the way I phrase and the word or the terminology I use. And then stay committed, right? There's a lot of deflections along the way. So if you have priorities, if you have a goal, then stay committed. And some item I've sometimes struggled with, where people are not seeking support and helping in business projects or in private projects. We'll come to that in a moment, why I feel it's really important to seek support. Yeah. Coming to the run, why having a radar log, an old school radar log, is so beneficial in my mind. The example here, which I've used for my 100-mile run, was, well, let's think about the risk, right? There's weather implications, there's food implications. So I could go through those and prepare for them. There's assumptions, right? I could verify those assumptions. There are for sure issues, such as a business project encounters issues those encountered during the run. So I could strategize on how to deal and cope with them. And then there's dependencies, such as I was really dependent and had my wife doing the support, the bicycle support during the night. And then I clearly also stated my out of scope, because I said, I want to finish the run and I don't want to finish it under 24 hours. That's a very often a big goal for a 100-mile run, to finish it below 24 hours. So to me personally, a radar log is very useful in multiple aspects when conducting a project. Moving on to the importance of small steps, and the importance here really, that it's really hard if you think of big projects or long runs, right? You need to focus on achievable milestones and not the entire distance, right? If you're at the start of a 100-mile run, you don't think, well, great, I'm running 100 miles. You have different milestones. Maybe the aid stations, maybe sites along the way, right? Those are milestones that help you keep going, yeah? And use positive affirmations, right? Something that keeps you positively motivated. Focus on what you can control. As I mentioned earlier, negativity from the outside, stuff you can't control, is really something that you should set aside. Really, focusing on what you can control, and you can control that you are going to run, that you are going to learn the piano, as examples. Stay present and mindful. So most of us have family. There is some mindfulness with those types of activities, that you, of course, agree with your family, the weekly calendar, the priorities upfront. Visualizing success, right? If you have a plan, how much you, for example, accomplished along the way, right? Stuff that keeps you motivated. And then why not find joy in the experience, right? In the moment, right? Couple of things that came to my mind how bigger projects and how important the small steps is in the context of bigger projects. Going on with the business and endurance sports projects, some comparisons and some similarities and differences. I think having a clear goal in both areas is mandatory. Without it, it's, you're aiming at no chance of achieving it. But you have a choice, right? If you think about the response, you have a choice whether you want to take on the project or not. To me, announcing that you're working on a project, for example, in the private context, has a big advantage because you're preparing your environment for something that that is a high priority. And as such, it gives a benefit of reminding people during the summer or training season that you say, well, I'll only come to your birthday party for an hour or so because I need to get up the next morning. I have this goal. I want to accomplish something. And I feel like if people if they know in advance, it's much easier to deal with them, that they're more understandable than, not going or confronting them in the last minute. And so is in the business context, right? If you talk to your fellow peers, hey, we are taking on this new project, I might come back to you, need maybe some support from your side, some input. Why not, right? If they know the project is happening, it's probably easier to get support. The radiolog alluded to that. Key for me before embarking on a project, and then sponsors and stakeholders in the business context, that they are identified and notified and communicated to, right? And in your private life, you want to have your family on board, your friends on board, right? For the reasons I've stated. And in both areas, I feel like leaving your comfort zone at some point in time is key. Otherwise, you're not growing, right? If you're repetitively doing only the same thing around, there's very little chance that you will actually grow. And then in both areas, I feel that we are also able to move to the responsibility stage, right? That we get away from blaming others, from justifying behavior, that we really take on the ownership and the consequences of our actions. I think that is really, really key. Of course, in business, you need to be a bit more politically thinking, strategizing, right? That's all good. But at the bottom, I feel taking responsibility for your actions is the fundament of project success. Something I find different between the two areas of life is, in the last couple of years, I felt like there's projects come and go with new trends, new business trends, right? A couple of years ago, blockchain, now it's AI. Then many years ago, it was agility. They come and go, right? But are all those people that are lobbying or actively engaged in these projects, do they lean their ladder on the right wall? I don't know. But in your private life, I think you have a less dependency on external trends. Maybe if you're really defining your goal, setting your goal, you are leaning your ladder at the right wall. Don't, assuming that you are not just following external trends and not intrinsically motivated to do that. So those are a couple of thoughts on business and endurance projects. And now a few reflections on failure, because that's something I feel very few people openly address. And I often ask myself, I don't have the answer for it, why that is, right? What I've read and also believe in is that if you're planning for potential failure, that doesn't make you weak, it makes you a prepared, mentally stronger runner. and maybe a project manager. I'm saying that because there are multiple reasons why it's good to prepare for potential failure. But you can be assured that if you prepare, you're giving everything possible to complete and achieve your objectives. In business, I guess there's often resistance to plan for failure just because there's no opportunity for it, or it's not wanted to be talked about. But I guess with the radiolog, I'm alluding to it, there can be failures, and let's prepare for those. And then openly asking, well, if we haven't tried it, right? If you look back at something that didn't work, wouldn't it be worse to not have tried, right? And my personal failure, I tried to climb Mount Adams in the Cascades of northern Washington, the Pacific Northwest. And I think I did everything wrong that I could do. I got up too late. I was having too little fluid with me. Luckily, I had enough food. Basically, from my failures trying to climb Mount Adams, I learned so much that future climbs, such as on Mount Rainier, were successful. So I personally learned in climbing a lot from my failure on Mount Adams. And I could take a lot away from that failure, if you want to call it that way. So in summary, going back to what we talked about, are you leaning your ladder against the right wall? It's my initial question, right? My strong belief that you have a choice, and that if you want to grow, right, it's your choice, right? You have to leave your comfort zone. And more than ever, there are communities of like-minded people. So if you want to grow, if you are embarking on a journey, on a new project, I'm pretty sure you will find people that are mind-liked like you. And lastly, a recommendation to choose the responsibility stage to take ownership of your actions and take on that mindset. So with that, having said that, I want to go back to my initial questions, and if you can take a moment to look at your note from the beginning, the projects you always wanted to start, would you start them now or consider them? Did you find some benefits, some new insights into addressing your project? See, yes, small steps rule. Yes, very true. Good. Then just okay, I would like to start thinking about it when I do retrospectives from your words. Yeah. Good. And then lastly, if you are in need for a motivational video, there's it's German language, but on YouTube from last week's 100-mile run. So, yeah. And then I see there were many great ideas and insights presented here today that come in handy at different critical points in the process. Yeah, okay, good. Then I just have to say thank you so much for joining, taking the time, the most precious resource we have. And thank you, Thomas and Mohammed, for giving me the opportunity to present. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lutz,
Thanks a lot, Lutz.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
So Victoria is asking if you could put that link of the YouTube video into the
Sure.
chat.
Yep.
Because, everybody will see the deck because we will send it out as an attachment, and then you can have it again. So, some questions? Oh, yeah.
I just have a question. So you were talking about the responsibility process, and let's say if you talk about your Mauerweglauf, which is obviously finished, how did you take on responsibility? What was your point of view at this and for the run? Yeah, how did you manage that?
So for the run, I have a list of my training, and I'll talk to my family every Sunday. So we plan the next week, and then I plan my runs around family obligations or important matters. So I try to bring them on board as well. But it's my responsibility to then take on or take the actions to also to go run, right, and to make sure that is also in line with what my work obligations are. On that note, I've openly communicated that my goal of running 100 miles. Okay, some people might say you're completely crazy, which is fine, right? But it's my own goal, yeah. And I've blocked times in my calendar in Outlook where I'm running. And at times people try to put in meetings, and I've asked, well, is it possible to meet earlier or the next day or after? And I would say, openly speaking, 8 out of 10 requests were possible to schedule at an earlier time or a later time. So, that's why I'm a big advocate of announcing what you're trying to do, your goal, reflecting that in your timeline, because it also gives yourself credibility, right? I think that helps you to stay on track, to follow a long timeline. Yeah. During the race, it's a bit of a different. During the run, it's a bit of a different story, but I probably had the lowest point at 1:30 at night, and I was close of giving up. And as I said, my wife was supporting me on the bicycle, and she said, "You don't look too happy." I said, "I don't know if I can do it." And then she reminded me of, and then it made perfect sense, of what the medical team said beforehand, right? And they said, "You'll go to the next aid station, you'll take coffee, you'll sit down, and you really think, am I that tired? Am I that dead not to continue running?" Small steps. And then I said to myself, okay, well, maybe I'll give it another try. So I made it to the next aid station, And sure enough, this valley of despair and down, I think every runner knows that, I could run through that. And that has really helped me to be reminded of the small steps and the advice of the medical team before the race to say, hey, if you really think you can't do it, zip on a coffee, eat a couple of things, and then think about go to the next station. Not the entire stretch, but the next station. And that really helped me. And I think I can copy a bit of that in business life as well.
Okay. So are you using mantras? I'm not sure because I think I'll just be referring to some of my some of the long distance runners that I follow, they have a mantra, and it's more like you can do it or I can do it. Are you using mantras also not only by running but also in project management?
I assume so, but I'm not really too much into mantras, to be honest. Yeah, I don't have a clear answer on that one. I don't know.
There was a question by Daniel. How do you plan for failure?
Good one, yes. So planning for failure, I promised myself that I will try the utmost, and if I have to stop or to get out of the race, that I can look in the mirror and I can stand up and say, I've tried everything. And you can stumble, you can fall. There are many people that had some muscle problems. It was a very, very hot day in Berlin. But that was my approach. When I fail, it's really at the last resort. And of course, if the medical team would say, hey, you need to stop, then that would have been also a failure. But I for sure didn't want to jeopardize my health for just finishing a race. I think that needs to be put in perspective as well.
How would you say that failure is even an option? Even if you fail at something doesn't work out as would be optimal, you can learn something from it.
I think so, yes. And if you have failed once, you can try it again. I mean, what we are seeing right in American culture is that business founders fail at times and then they get up again and try it again.
Yeah.
You can take a lot off from it, and so failure and other
I think you have two other questions. So Alexandra raised her hand. Alexandra, you want to speak up? Open your mic.
Yes, I think my mic is open. I don't know, my camera doesn't work. I'm sorry. So that's why you can't see me, but you see my picture, I guess. I just have a question regarding the sports part. Thank you. First, thank you very much for the presentation. I really enjoy it. And I have one question. There was a question regarding mantra before. So what do you think when you are running? I mean, you are running for hours. You are probably running, I don't know, very, very long time. What are you thinking about? Isn't it boring? Just simple. Isn't it boring? How do you motivate yourself continuing running?
So if you are, at least again, I'm talking about myself. We have other runners that might have a different perspective. I find running, for me personally, the best medicine to completely relax. That might sound crazy, but after a while, when you're running, your brain really relaxes. You're losing the common problems, everyday issues. It really goes away, and you're focusing on something bigger. And to me, that's really a very nice stage to be in. Some call it also runner's high, right? Because something happens in your body, right? I think there's enough research out there that good things happen. Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of research about the runner's high, and there are millions of people which never have experienced it. That's exactly my question. So the runner's high, I think people who have experienced it, they know it's coming. Yeah, but how to get there? When does it come? Does it start? After 3 minutes, after half an hour? Did it start in the beginning? Did you have it only after the first?
I think my first runner's high was at the 100-kilometer run in Taubertal after kilometer 60. Because then then really I was in a flow, and you know, I was just the happiest person on the planet.
This is nice to know, because this is really motivating. You know, you had to train and to train and to train, and then you experienced it. Thank you very much for your reply.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Alexandra. So we have another one who raised his hand, but first, Sarah Varnan put something in the chat window, if you can see that. Taking all responsibility in a project is like shooting on one's own foot. And I have seen people take advantage of this. How did you handle such situation, or do you have any tips?
Well, don't. I think everybody is darling is everybody's step, as we say in Germany. That means, if you know, don't make yourself a fool, right? Responsibility as a project manager is, if you make decisions, you have to be responsible. You have to take ownership of the consequences. But that doesn't mean that, for example, if I work with our statisticians team, I'm not a statistician, so I have to rely on the team, and that the feedback of the team and the input the team is providing, I'm taking responsibility for it, because it's part of the project. So it's more, I think, more how we collaborate and what environment you are setting. So why would people have an interest in fooling you if you are not fooling them, right? If you ask for help, or if you have helped at other times, I think it's a I don't see the point why teams should counter work. If that's happening, it's a toxic workplace, and there's poor management, right? Because or alternatively, the goal and the objective, the business benefit of the project isn't defined. But why would people work against you if you're trying to achieve a common goal? Yeah.
Mm. So then we have the hand raised by somebody called ABJ 0411. Whoever that is, ABJ.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know like why I can't able to change my username. It was like some the earlier one, so can't able to change it. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and it was a really wonderful presentation. So I have one question with like people asking about running. Like for example, if you're training for the 100 mile, and in between consider the case you get somewhere injured, for maybe because of the overtraining or something, like a kind of some stress fracture or anything. So do you consider like that as a failure? And what step you take later to do, like for example recovery? And do you have like upcoming 100 mile? Do you still want to pursue that one based on the injury, or do you want to drop that one? Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. So I think you only have one, but you have only one body, right? And so, like I said earlier, if a medical team would tell me to stop running, then in my mind there's no reason to continue running. You're just jeopardizing yourself. Just looking at the chat here. So when it comes to failure, if you're looking at it from a if you have set yourself a goal of finishing a 100-mile run, yes, you haven't done it, right? But isn't it different? You have had an injury. Maybe it's then, like we said earlier, you learn from your failure. Maybe something to consider looking at your training schedule. Maybe you should have checked your body before. So you can learn from it, right? Technically, yes, you haven't finished your 100-mile run as such. Yeah, you didn't achieve your goal, but there are good reasons why that is. If you have a medical situation, it's different in my mind, and even worse if you're not finishing because you have failed to train because of, you know, other side projects that have not been a high priority. Yeah. I think that's much more harming to your self-esteem, to your self-confidence in the long run, in the mid side, than, you know, if you had a medical problem.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but still, do you want to like pursue later on for that one? Like, for example, after like 3 or 4 months of recovery and rehab, so do you still start the same again, or do you want to drop that project because you got injured in between?
It depends, right? I would make that dependent on the medical advice and listen into your body. But if so, if it's not possible, then for sure I would try to define a different goal. Maybe a speedy recovery, or learn a new skill, become better at swimming. You know, there are so many goals out there that if you think about, and the tools we have covered, right, to identify those. So if one goal is no longer achievable, there's a huge area of opportunities out there. You just have to then define a new goal for yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We have Stephanie Meyer, who asked in the chat, I have the experience with the runner's high and small distance. Don't wait for it.
Yeah.
Try to calculate something, try to count in another language, try to repeat some book's content, and suddenly it happens. Probably.
It was only a statement. Was a question before.
Yeah. But is it also your experience, Lutz? It comes when it comes.
Yeah, and honestly, sometimes I'm just not thinking anything, which some people also have a difficulty with, but I feel that as really rewarding, relaxing, to be really in a flow, and you know, yeah.
Okay. And then we have Douglas Wilson. The need for endurance and consistency for long-term goals makes long-distance running such a great analogy, in my view. Motivation is hard to maintain at a higher level for a long time, so all of the structure in these large goals keeps the machine moving forward when motivation is low, making the impossible achievable. Some comments on that? Or Douglas, do you want to extend?
Sure, yeah. I mean, when we're looking at the goal of running 100 miles, it's very large. It seems impossible. And there were some comments before about breaking it down into smaller goals, but I think also that's a great tool, but all of the structure that was presented today, you know, it keeps the momentum moving when you're only relying on motivation. If you think only at the big picture of the goal, you think, oh, I won't be able to maintain motivation for that. I'll struggle at times. But as long as you have all these different tools to turn to, it will re-energize you and refocus you, and you know, it really picks up the slack when motivation fails you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Mohammed, you want to take it further?
Yeah. Okay. Just let me share my screen. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, and for joining us. And these are the list of our next events. And okay, As I have said before, we have normally 2 webinars per month and 1 face-to-face meeting in Hochschule Darmstadt. And you can please feel free to visit our PMI website, German chapter. And this is our local government Darmstadt email address. Please feel free to contact us. As we said before, we are 5 volunteers from 5 countries, and we would be happy and pleased if you join us as a volunteer in our team or another team in the chapter. And this is our website as well. Okay.